All right. Welcome. This is the Q&A for the Masters Pen Christian Writers Conference. We have Tiffany Stockton, Jeannie Leach, and Allison Nance with us here today. So to get started, I'm just going to let you each have a few minutes and tell us a little bit about yourselves and your writing journey, and then we'll open it up for questions. And I've got some questions to ask and all. So, Tiffany, you want to start? You're the first one on my screen that I see. So,
Okay, I will certainly go ahead. So my name is Tiffany Stockton. I began my writing publishing career as Amber Miller. Actually, Miller is my maiden name, and then switched over to Amber Stockton. And now I'm doing Tiffany Stockton, Tiffany Amber Stockton, trying not to lose the readers that I collected over the years. Longtime member of ACFW. I started way, 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 way back before they even had their first conference. So I'm been around the block a little bit, and so far I have published 20, I don't even remember now. I think it's 26 books now, and working on another one for Love Inspired. And I've been doing mostly historical. I've done some contemporaries, and then in a lot of the writing I've taught on fiction writing and nonfiction as well. And then I've done critiques, and I've been around the block with conferences and taught all over the country. And then I've also been a part of this conference, I believe, since it started back in 2008 or 9. I've been contributing as a instructor and presenter and everything for this conference. So excited to answer questions and share whatever I can that can help.
thank you. We appreciate that. And it's great to meet everybody virtually in person. So, Jeannie?
Hi, I have the pleasure of saying that I was the 46th person to join the ACFW. And I got a personal invitation from, oh no, here it goes again. Never mind. I got a personal invitation from one of the originators, original founders. Um, and I did a lot of things. I learned so much through the ACFW, and then I joined one of the early critique groups, and that's where I started to realize I'm not that great of a writer, but I really love to edit and to critique. And about that time, an ACFW member, Kathy Ide, started an editors group. So I didn't quit ACFW, but I just moved over and joined her group, and I learned so much there. She had classes to take, and within the first year, I was making more at editing than I was on my day job. So I quit my day job, and I haven't punched a time clock since. But I've just loved it. I'm doing what Tiffany says, doing a lot of mentoring and teaching and coaching, and then a lot of editing too. I love workshops, giving workshops. I gave workshops here in Denver and on at the Christian Pen, which is the editors group. I taught things there for people to look out for who didn't know what to look for when they're editing fiction. And so that's been fun. And so here I am, still going at it.
Thank you. Allison?
Hey, thanks, Lee. My name is Allison Nance, and thank y'all for having me with you today. I guess my writing journey really began, I think, for all of us as a reading journey. Just as a child, I've always loved books, but it wasn't until this past summer in July that I had my debut novel, Deep Cries Out, release. It's contemporary fiction, and that's the kind of writing that I like to do, contemporary fiction with a lot of grit and a lot of hope and a lot of faith. My husband and daughter and I were actually in Japan serving as missionaries back in 2022. We've since moved back to Texas, and that's where we live now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nice.
So we've got a varied panel here, which is a good thing. Tiffany and Jeannie, what have y'all seen since you've been in the industry for more than 2 decades? What have y'all seen as some of the biggest changes over the course of time? Good, bad, in between.
Probably the self-publishing is becoming it's just booming. That doesn't mean that they're doing a good job, but that's how people are choosing to edit to go. But I think when I first, back in 2000, my first book that I put out was it was horrible, and it was put out by one of the first print on demands. And when I went to Marlene Bagnall's conference that year, I found out that they were a scam. From that moment on, none of the rest of my series has ever been sold. I just had to self-publish them. But nowadays, with so many hybrid publishers, indie publishers, there's just more than just the big five. You can get your book published well, get a good publisher, and still not have to pay it through an arm and a leg. So I think that's one of the biggest thing, is that the print on demand has become more acceptable and better, and there just aren't as many scammers out there, but you still have to watch out for scammers.
Yeah,
and
well, we still see a lot about scammers because there was something on the ACFW loop just this week about somebody was using their name as a scam. So
they were,
we
yeah,
still
That
the community
can,
fiction finder, yeah, trying to
Yeah.
get information from people.
and
yeah.
and something that about that is that AI is actually putting whatever name they want to on somebody's book, and then it's impossible for an author to try to sue for it. Who do you sue?
Mhm.
So that's something to watch out for. I've seen a few books where I know the person because I edited the book, and I went to buy a copy for a friend, and it had somebody else's name as the author.
Oh,
I don't
wow,
know
that's
how.
scary.
I mean, so that's a kind of thing that's going on right now. AI
Yeah.
thinks it's so smart. It's so dumb.
Yeah.
Yep. I would say one of the biggest things that I've noticed is the amount of time that an author has to spend marketing and doing a lot of the promotion and publicity for themselves to get themselves known. Back when I started, you had a publisher that would come behind you, and they would have a marketing team, and they still do. When you go traditionally published, they do still have a marketing team, but there was a lot of work that they would do for you. They would schedule book tours. They would have a lot of press releases. They would do with online, they would do blog tours, and a lot of that would be handled by their publicity and marketing. Now the tide has shifted, like Jeannie had mentioned, with a lot of the self-pubs and indie pubs, small presses. They don't have the marketing budgets to be able to come behind you. And so a lot of that falls to the author to organize that, which would necessitate the the networking aspect. Make sure that you know a lot of different people. Make sure you're getting out there and connecting with other authors, connecting with your readers. Just connecting with other authors would go a long way, because you could get in with their newsletter and reach a whole huge new audience that you never would have yourself done. And there's that old adage of, let somebody else honk your horn because the sound travels twice as far. And
I
so,
like that. I hadn't heard that before.
so a lot of times, especially today, we've got a lot of people out there that are just look at me, look at me, look at me, and they're promoting themselves so often, but yet then you hear about, okay, help a bunch of other people get what they want, and then you'll get everything you need. And so that whole networking aspect, I think, is huge now. I'm not saying that it wasn't big 20 years ago, but it definitely is a lot more with the onset of social media, with the onset of so many things that are out there with YouTube and the channels and all of that opportunities. You definitely need to be a lot more up on that, but don't get too overwhelmed with it. I mean, if God's called you to write, then leave it in his hands and he'll guide you to the right places.
Absolutely. And that's why we have the networking and the Q&A. That's why other virtual and in-person conferences have the same thing. And then you can network and, ACFW, Faith, Hope, and Love, and other organizations. So, Allison, what's been the biggest surprise to you, maybe as a much newer author than Tiffany and Jeannie.
I think one of the things that, takes a lot of getting used to is kind of the hurry up and wait aspect, especially of traditional publishing. There's a sense of urgency to like turn in that first draft and get your query out and everything like that. And then, you go for several months, waiting to hear back. And then you go for several more months, to get a release date. And then as Tiffany just said, it's months and months and months now of, a lot of marketing that's on your own shoulders, to get the book out to people that you know personally or, online, a lot of connecting with them. And then also working in tandem, with a publisher. My publisher is a smaller publisher, Hidden Shelf Publishing House. So they don't necessarily have the budget, of like a big five publishing company. But at the same time, they've been really great to work with. And it's been a really eye-opening experience to have, the book published. But I would say for sure, definitely be patient, be patient
Yeah.
for a lot of things. Yes.
Yes.
And when did your book
Yes.
come out, Allison?
It
If I
came
don't
out
mind asking.
in July.
Okay, so it's new. Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
congratulations.
There is a whole lot of hurry up and wait in this
Mhm.
industry. So, all three of y'all, what are some maybe marketing tips since y'all brought up marketing? I know we talked a little bit about networking, but what are some other marketing tips for authors you might have?
I
Number
would
one,
say,
build your newsletter list. So try to get as many people as possible to sign up for that newsletter, offer what's called a lead magnet of some sort to entice them, something related to what you do, whether it be a novella or a whole novel that you want to give away, something you've written. It could even be if you're just getting started, like Allison's just getting going, doesn't have a backlist, doesn't have a lot of that opportunity. Partner with other authors and see if they have some giveaways of their books that you might be able to give away, digital copies and everything for the signups of your newsletter. But by all means, social media is not reliable. Their algorithms and everything are so unpredictable. And you can get into there and then you just figured it out, they change. And so you want to try to draw as much of your readership back to you and to something that you control.
Great suggestions. Anybody else?
yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I'll kind of piggyback off that just a little bit. I've actually found for me, Facebook is good, I think, for people that I know in real life. But for me, Instagram has been really helpful. My following isn't huge, but just the amount of authors and influencers who aren't necessarily authors, but who have large followings, like Christian, like literal artists that do paintings. Poets, people who are bakers, and things like that, who have a large following, who enjoy reading. There's a lot of power in making a personal connection, and I think that I've found Instagram to be really, really helpful that way, because, it brings us close, whether we want it or not, and whether we can really control what people see or not. It still has, at least for me and for my debut novel, given it like a huge boost in its first month of sales. Not necessarily networking with other authors, like I said, or even, online groups so much, but just kind of that cross-pollination of networking online. And kind of going along with what Tiffany said, just getting your name out in as many places as possible. I think I read somewhere one time that a person has to be exposed to like your brand or your product about 7 times before they'll consider looking at it. And then if I think of how many ads I see, every day, like on the internet, on social media, on TV, it does take about 6 or 7 times until I'm like, I'll read the back cover copy of this book, or something, and just see, or I'll see what this author's about. So I think just that constant exposure is also really helpful, even if it's not necessarily like in an author circle or in a publishing circle too.
Good suggestions. Jeannie, were you going to say something?
Oh, probably. I I have recently listened in on my husband. He wrote a book last year, and it's timely and political. Anyway, and he's been listening to how to promote your book. And one of the things that the person that was speaking talked about, making sure that where you are on social media is appropriate, basically. Like she was talking about someone that she was working with who wanted to catch people's attention because nobody was buying his book. So he decided that he took several pictures of himself wearing a red hat, and he wore the red hat outside, he wore it at the ball game, he wore it wherever. And he thought that was going to get people to come in, the red hat guy. And it didn't do anything. And so we just have to, it's hard to know who's going to buy what, but you have to go where the readers are. You don't just throw this red hat thing out to the, the hemisphere and hope that everybody that ever sees it is going to buy your book, because a lot of people don't read these days. They would rather buy the movie or, so you make sure that whatever you are doing, that it is appropriate, that like Tiffany talked about, going with in the authors groups and getting your name out there too, because authors are readers, and it will help you. You don't need to over emphasize your things. You just need to find that little niche and do it, and put out your newsletter, and to the people that want to be on your newsletter, those are the people that want to buy your books. So just, you can't go overboard on doing it wrong, and just be honest. This is what I do, and you'd love it. Sometimes that works better than anything.
That's
And
right.
and don't be afraid to make mistakes. I mean, you live and learn.
Yeah.
And so you're going to try something, and you're going to try a marketing angle, marketing ploy, whatever you're going to do. And maybe it doesn't work, and that's okay. You can just figure out what it was that didn't work, and you can pivot and redirect and try something new. It's exposures. And, just like Allison said, it takes 7 to 8 times, 7 to 10 sometimes, before somebody's going to look at something. That's not 7 to 8 good times. That could just be 7 to 8 exposures. And whether the exposure is a good one or a bad one, you just want to keep at it, and understand that you don't need to reach everybody. You just need to reach the people that your story is meant to reach. And you're only going to do that by finding, your readers, but you're going to have to work at it and have to try. And then,
For those just starting, how did you hone in on who were your readers? And I know that can be hard sometimes.
For me, actually, Goodreads was a really helpful tool because, there are books that I wanted to read myself. And so I would read a lot of reviews, from a lot of different people. Kind of the same thing on Instagram. There are a lot of like bookstagrammers there who are Christian and who are believers, but at the same time, they read cross genre, they read all kinds of stuff. And for my writing specifically, that is kind of my target, is someone, with a heart for Jesus, but also wants to tackle, like real world issues that aren't always addressed, sometimes in Christian fiction. So for me, I kind of, sought them out. And part of my launch strategy for Deep Cries Out was to reach out to a couple of influencers. Like I said, they weren't all necessarily writers, quite a few of them were, but then just say, I just want to send you my book and see what you think. And then also I think Jeannie, hit it out of the park, having authors behind you, who, like, I know in my ACFW critique group, there are ladies there who, like really encouraged me, like my critique partners. They were like, this is good, like it needs to be out there. And so I think kind of having those combined forces is something that's like very powerful, when you're trying to market and trying to find that target audience. So yeah, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, because your target audience isn't always going to read exactly what you like to read. I'm a very, very picky reader. I'm a very picky reader, because time is so valuable, right? And like, I don't want to give, 5 or
Mhm.
6 hours of my life to a story, reading it, like if I don't want to, and I wouldn't want that, for my readers as well of my work. So I want to make sure that like what I'm writing is worth their time.
Awesome. Thank you. Jeannie, as an editor, what are some tips and suggestions you have for beginning writers looking to publish for the first time writers and all?
Always get, now this is not me, this is the industry, always get a professional edit done before you send it in. That started around 28, 9, 10, when after the mortgage meltdown. That was when subsequently after that, a couple years after that, was a recession. And during the recession, all of the major players, the publishers, had to cut down on the number of editors that they had on staff. They used to maybe have 2 or 3 primary editors and 2 or 3 subsequent proofreaders for one book, but they could no longer afford to do that. And the prices of books jumped at that time too. So that's when they started putting out a note anytime they get something that wasn't the big fives, particularly anything that was not requested, they would write a note saying, please get this professionally published, edited before you submit it again. And that's just become the norm now. It's been 10, 15 years since then, and it's still the norm. They still want to see. Now the indie publishers aren't quite as picky, but they still have to get the book edited before they can publish it too. So yeah, it just make sure that you've learned. I know it's hard because when I started, the internet wasn't up, and I wrote, and I had to go to the library and look things up, and I wasn't even sure what I needed to find out. We've got like the ACFW; you can learn, really fast how to do it. Where do you do it? What do you say when you submit? But just make sure that when you submit, that book is the best it could possibly be already. And if you've never been an author before, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the best at that moment. I'm not saying it's a bad book, but there's just so many things. Like my Edit Like a Pro that I did this week, I had a page of 7 pages of a list of things to look for before you send your book in. So it's big, it's fun, and the ACFW is one of the best places to find things. I'll tell you that right now, to how to know what to do. There's people who will answer your questions. If you have a question, just go online and, how do you do this? What do I do next? And somebody will answer it. They're there. People love to help.
Mhm.
Well, there's a lot to learn when it comes to the writing world, and we never stop learning. We're
Yeah.
always learning something new and piggybacking and growing and all of that. Allison, was there anything that really surprised you as you got into publishing other than how long of a wait between everything?
I mean, not really. I think one thing that you just have to learn too is just to have thick skin and to not take things personally. Um, Deep Cries Out, it was the first fictional thing that I wrote, but before that, I had learned about traditional publishing and how to pitch to agents and publishers because I wrote a nonfiction book. And I kind of learned to speed write because I have a master's in biblical studies from Moody. So, and I'm a procrastinator. So a lot of, those 2,000-word papers would be cranked out the day before they were due. But
Been there.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, really, I think just the thing is that, having thick skin is normal and it's not a bad thing. And, sometimes heavy-handed criticism of your work is really, really good. especially if it's given like with a loving intent. But yeah, that's something that I think that you learn gradually and over time. But really, besides that, there weren't any huge surprises. I'm a pretty big researcher too, so I try to go into a situation knowing what to expect.
Well, and I agree with you. I think we should learn about the industry before, before we should start pitching and all. And again, it's a learning process and there's a lot to it. Tiffany, and coaching clients, what's some of the biggest questions you get from authors and newbie authors and all?
I mean, one of the most common ones would be, who's going to buy my book and where do I put it? How do I submit it? Do I need to have an agent is another big one. And so a lot of times a lot of the people that are wanting to write a book, sometimes they get ahead of themselves too. Like they haven't even finished the book and they're trying to find out if they need an agent, trying to find out who's going to buy it, where to shop it. And so usually the first question that I will ask anybody that wants to come in for coaching is, have you finished a book? And that's the biggest thing. Cause I tell people is there's something to be said of putting the end. Because there are millions of people out there that say they want to write a book. Not everybody does. And that testing the mettle of being able to see if you can actually get to that point. And so I will coach a lot of people through that as far as finding where to pitch it, whether you need an agent. Again, that depends. And, I walk them through, well, what's the message? Who is your target audience? What are you trying to get out? How important is it that you're trying to get out? Why are you writing? What is the purpose of this story that you have, whether it's a nonfiction or a fiction? What's the purpose of your book and the message that's in it? And a lot of times I will direct them and guide them. And then for agents, I will say, if they're looking for traditional published, obviously, yes, because as far as I know, I don't think any of the big fives, accept anything that's unagented. But if they're doing self-pub or indie pub or small press, then they might not need an agent. They might be able to rep. I mean, I sold my first 12 books without an agent and did okay. And then an agent came in and helped boost things a little bit, but you don't necessarily have to have one. And that tends to be a big question that a lot of people ask.
Were those 12 books, were they all with Love Inspired or were they with other presses or?
They were with Barber Publishing, actually. So I wrote for Heart Song Presents before that
Okay.
shut down. And then, before they kind of, grandfathered us over into Love Inspired.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's good to know. And that's one thing, so many of these presses, they open up and then they shut down and also trying to keep up with all the changes and
Yeah, and
everything. And
Jeannie mentioned that there's several small presses that are out there, and Allison, her book is out with the small press.
Mhm.
There's several of them, several reputable ones that are out there and available, and I think it's exciting to see a lot of these smaller press. They may not have a big budget,
Mhm.
but they can help you get your story out there, and they can partner with you in a way that might seem an impossible feat to try to go with one of the bigger publishers.
Absolutely. And three of them partner with the conference and are accepting pitches. So that was in today's newsletter that went out. So, and we're very appreciative for them to come alongside and help our authors. Patty, do you have any questions you want to ask?
I do have some questions that have come to mind as I've been listening to you ladies talk. One of the questions I have, being a person who's going to be sending my first manuscript in, what is your feeling, especially for you, Tiff, who has so many books out there, when your editor disagrees with something that you have in your manuscript? Is that an issue? Is that a big issue? Is that something that I am probably looking at? I mean, I know you can't say that. You haven't seen my story and you don't know my editor, but it's a general question. How do you handle that?
It is definitely an issue, because your editor is working with the house. They have a certain requirement. They have a certain list of guidelines and things that they are following that are part of that particular house's voice, brand, style, whatever it is, whatever it might be. And when an editor will come back, a lot of times they will, if they see something that doesn't resonate, it might be some facts that you have in your story. I had an instant one time in one of my stories, one of my historicals, and I did some research on and I can tell you the specifics of it. I did research on where the first instance was of the flying of the American flag during the Revolutionary War. And so there were a lot of different sources, but there were conflicting sources. So not everybody agrees on the documentation of where that first flag was flown, but I had sufficient number of resources that corroborated the fact that it was flown at a place that I had in my story. And so the editor came in and pushed back. And of course, when the editor comes back, especially as a first-time author, you tend to think, oh, I just need to accept everything the editor says. The editor, of course, is the queen or the king, and whoever it is, they are the authority. And that's not true. Now, you want to do it you can push back. You can be confident in what you've written, provided you know for sure that you have done your research. And there is a definite way. You still want to be respectful, because this industry
Absolutely.
and this market is a very small industry, and
yeah.
people do talk.
Mhm,
So you might think you
Yeah.
found your niche little corner somewhere and nobody knows who you are, but you would be surprised how much a lot of the editors and agents and publishers
That's
and
true. Yeah.
writers have conversations. So you don't want to be a difficult writer, especially out of the starting
Right.
gate, but you also don't want to compromise your story for something that somebody else has come in and said. And so there's a respectful way to go back and forth. And then, because I mean, none of us like to be critiqued, none of us like to be criticized. So the first response is usually, how dare you? And so,
You tend to get your back up a little bit, like, yeah, how
yes,
dare you? Yeah.
yes,
I
it's
guess
a
the way
total
I feel
natural
about it is,
reaction.
hey, this is my first book, and anything they say is going to be fine with me. I mean,
Right,
unless they,
right.
unless
Well, God
they counter
inspired
some
me to write
research.
every single word that was in this novel, and you can't possibly tell me that there's
Yeah,
anything
no,
to be
I would
cut.
be like, hey, if you think this will make it better, we'll do it.
Right.
You know,
And so you just got it's just like with when you get a critique or when you get a professional edit, before you submit to a publisher. You just want to weigh the comments and the remarks that the editor has put in there. You want to weigh it against your goal, your mission for your story. And if the changes, if you know that the changes make the story better, go ahead and accept them and move on with them. But if there is something that you are fairly adamant and it's important and key and critical to your story, I would go back to the editor. Well, I wouldn't fire off an email within 5 minutes of reading the remark. I would
no,
probably
you want to
recommend you
think it over.
sit on it for a day or two, depending upon what
Mhm.
your timeline is, and just kind of soak it in a little bit, let it, ruminate a little bit in the back of your mind, and then sit down. And if it is something, and if you're sure after one or two times of going back and reading it that it's something you disagree with, go back to the editor and then say, hey, you made this comment, but I would prefer, and because of, I would like to keep this in. Is there any way that we can work together to still keep this in, but then maybe still address whatever the issue was that the editor had?
Okay. Okay.
Good point. Thank you.
Well,
As
I have
an
another
editor,
question too. Oh, go ahead, Leah. I'm
no,
sorry.
I was just going to say, from an editor's point of view, Jeannie, do you have anything you want to add?
No, that's pretty much good right there. The one thing I had a person earlier this year, uh, I work primarily for myself. I'm a freelance editor, but I also work for Elk Lake Publishing. And I had one of Elk Lake's books earlier this year, and she was taking forever just to tell us what the book's going to be about. I was on the third chapter. I'm like, still not sure. So I
Yeah.
did have to tell her, let's cut out these and these, this type of a scene. She had one, it was a historical from 1940s, and she had a captain and his subordinate, and they kept coming back. The captain would call him in and say, we need to talk. He'd come in, he'd say two or three things, and it would be over. And they did that over and over. I said, get rid of those. Just have them tell them once, and then that's it. She did that. But she also added another whole chapter.
Oh, no.
So I had to, so even though I'd already been through the whole book, I had to go add that, read that again. Do you need something? Okay. I thought it was. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have the door closed and bothering Dave's Bronco games. Go Broncos.
Oh
anyway.
boy, that is a cardinal sin, Jean. If you have a Bronco lover
Oh,
in
we
your
won.
family.
Yay, we won. Okay, so anyway, get back to that. Well, so I went through that and I read that the new chapter, and I said, well, it really does add to it, but you might need to make up for it by cutting something else. The next one I get, she had a whole nother chapter. She had over 15,000 words above what she submitted. And I said, this
my.
isn't going to work. You're going to have to cut them. She goes, well, I think she'll like it. She liked what I wrote at the beginning. So the publisher's going to like it. I said, just be ready. And within 3 days after she submitted it, I got a note from the managing editor saying, all right, the two of you, you need to cut 15,000 words. I don't care which ones, but you cut 15,000. And she just like, I didn't hear from the author for over a week. I tried to get her to engage.
She was probably in shock.
Kind of gave her, but I told her you might have
You
to
told her
cut
you'd
this.
wonder.
Yeah. I told her, because they have a specific, this kind of book, this many words, this many, they have that list, and she was well over. And I told her, just be ready. I said, it's a good book now that we've done everything and now that you've had all this stuff. But so, yeah, and I haven't heard from her since. I keep writing and saying, how's it going? And never really hearing back. So I don't know if she's blaming, but anyway, so there's that kind of thing. And then I get people writing to me through my website. I offer a free sample edit, and I gave her the sample edit, and she wrote back and said, you are so wrong. I'm like, what? Wait, I have dozens of award-winning authors that I worked on their books, and a lot of people who've made it to New York bestsellers and others and Amazon bestseller. I had one guy who was he was selling so well his books. They were like espionage books, and he was he showed me a picture of his rating that week, and he was above Tom Clancy. He was like,
wow.
So, and here this lady saying, you're wrong. You're doing it. You're so wrong. I haven't heard back from her, but I told her, well, good luck, have fun. It's like, so
be interesting to see what her rate is a year from now, Jean.
Pardon me.
Well, as Allison said, you need a thick skin in this game, and you have to build it up. It doesn't come overnight, and especially for first time authors, it's hard to have that. Sometimes it takes time. Go ahead.
Tiffany had mentioned someone who says God gave me this book. I hear that a lot.
How many times have you heard that one?
I'll tell you what, the one thing I've never seen other than once is a man who wanted me to do the free sample edit, and I got his first few pages, and they were color coded. And pink means don't touch it. Red means this is what God told me word for word. This is the scripture, and this is my own words, and you can edit those. And I said, I just wrote back and realized, I said, I'm really sorry. I'm not the right editor for you. Good luck. I mean, you just can't be mean to them, but hello. When God tells you to do so, it's usually not word for word unless you're writing the Bible. Other than that, gives you an impression. He tells you, write your story, write what about the hardships that you had so that other people can learn, write what you learned. But he didn't tell them to write it this way and say this and this and this and this, unless it's maybe sometimes the pastor is, writing, God gives him words. He will give you words, but for the average book, not necessarily. So yeah, people need to have thick skins. And can I tell one more anecdote, if you don't mind?
Sure.
When I first started back in the mid 90s, we had to submit hard copies. So we printed off 300 pages. You had to have either an envelope or another box within a box, and you had to have a box with the postage that for them to send it back when they when they reject it. And anyway, uh, the best I ever did was that I got 5 boxes back from different editors on the same book in one day.
Oh,
Yeah,
gee.
you have to get a thick
Wow.
skin when that kind of thing happens.
That's a
Is
little
that the day that you
overwhelming,
cried, you
isn't it?
sat down with a whole gallon of whatever kind of ice cream you like?
I know.
Well,
Yeah,
it's really great when you get a rejection back from a department and at a publishing house that you didn't even submit your book to.
Oh, my.
Wait, did that happen?
Yes.
How is that even possible, Tiff? What happened there?
Well, you submit it to the publisher, it goes around and, and if you haven't met with them and it's unsolicited
Oh, okay.
submission, uninvited submission, and
Yeah.
which is something that I did as a newbie author. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I honestly, I fell into this business and I didn't plan to be an author at all. It was definitely
I
something
remember
that
you
God
telling
led
the
me
story
to.
of how you got started. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, Patty, and I was very, very naive. I had no idea what I was doing. And so I just attended conference and Tracy Peterson was the one who got me into ACFW and at the time ACRW. And
that's the person that got me started. I
oh,
couldn't
she
remember
was the
her
one
name.
that sent you the
I
invite?
couldn't
Okay.
remember her name. Sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Kathy
so she
Kobach
got
sent
me
one.
in there and everything. And I didn't know. I mean, I was just kind of going along with the flow and doing what I thought was the process. And I just sort of said, okay, fine, I'm gonna take my story and I'm just gonna submit it to all the publishers that I just saw that were at the conference. I didn't know that I was supposed to actually have them ask me for it. And so rejections came back and I had one that was from the children's department at Zondervan. And I went,
Oh, how funny.
okay, I didn't even write to a children's department. I'm not even sure how the children's department got my story. But yeah, I mean, that week was, I mean, I joined into the industry when I could still submit and, I mean, I didn't have to print off the whole copy of the book. But I could still send an email and things like that. But I actually, no, I think I did. When I sent my first story, it was printed out and I got the envelope back in the mail. And then, but yeah, the cover letter came from the children's department and said, I'm sorry, but this story isn't going to fit. And I'm going, well, duh, it's not a children's book. And yeah, but that was like a week of rejections that I had gotten, all in one. And yeah, a tub of ice
Wow.
cream definitely does help, ease the
Absolutely.
pain a little bit.
Absolutely.
Another
So you
question I
sued
had
your,
for,
I'm sorry, I'll let you go in a second, Patty. You sued
Okay.
your rejections with Ice Cream Allison. Is there anything you used to soothe yours with?
Not really. I don't know. I find myself taking really long showers or baths sometimes. Just standing there,
Okay,
letting
on
the
the other
stress wash
end,
off.
on the other end of the spectrum, how do y'all celebrate when a book comes out?
That's when I get ice cream for
Ice
sure.
cream?
Yeah,
Okay.
or some kind of dessert for sure.
Okay. Tiffany,
I talked my
Oh,
husband
gosh.
into taking me out to dinner.
out
Yeah.
to dinner?
nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
generally
yeah.
we'll probably reach out to a few friends of mine and say, okay, that's it. We've got to go. We got to go do something fun.
Yeah.
And whether it be out to dinner or whether it just be, going out and just doing something fun. Like I remember
Right.
one time I had one of my novels that that was out was it was set on Mackinac Island, and Mackinac Island is known for their fudge. And so when that book came out, we just went out and we got fudge. And
Cool.
and
There you
so
go. Yeah. Patty, did you say you had another question?
I was going to say, speaking of your books coming out, the only one, of course, I've had out is that little Christmas story. And I remember the day that it was actually showed up on Amazon that, your book is available now because a friend of mine helped me upload it and everything. I was in Kentucky Fried Chicken in Pueblo. And I said something to the lady at the thing. She goes, oh, that is so exciting. And I said, well, when I get a print copy, because it's barely on Kindle now, I said, the print copy won't come out for a while. I said, I'll be sure and get you a copy. And I've been back there, I don't know how many times, and I've never seen her again. I always felt so bad. She probably quit her job since, But yeah, it was very exciting.
And
And
the
of
funny
course,
little story is I actually live in the town that KFC started.
Oh,
Oh,
where I
wow.
live at,
That's
right.
where I live
I
right
love
now in
my
Awesome.
Kentucky.
love my
Have you
caves.
incorporated that into any of your novels?
Not yet, not
Not
yet, but
yet.
I'm doing some research
Okay,
and you know and seeing if I can do something. So
good,
Mhm.
good. How do y'all incorporate your faith into your writing? I mean, I know you write about it, but how do you incorporate your relationship with God when you're writing?
through
so
the
do you mean
character.
like
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, Jeannie.
Write it into the characters,
Mhm.
into their character sketch. They're not just the GMC, but the NMC, the need, motivation, and conflict. There's every person in your book. There's one period, at least one person has to be questioning their faith or have faith question, or maybe they're mad at God for because their mom had an accident and died when they were young, and God, they just blamed God. I mean, you just have to find that character that's going to be the one that you're going to beat up the most, and then they will have the biggest wonderful change in the end. So that's how you can't really write a book about faith if you don't have it yourself. And so whatever is
Exactly.
going on with you, you can put that in the book too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Allison or
well,
Tiffany,
Jean,
go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no.
Jean, you say that you're with Elk Lake, and
Yes.
I had Jason.
Oh,
You know
yes.
Jason Harp. He was a beta reader for me.
Oh,
And he wrote back and he said, people who love Jesus and Gunsmoke will love this book. Of course, we have that connection because I told you he was a child Western actor. I don't know how many people know that, but anyway. I thought, well, okay.
So Lee, so to get back to that question though, you wanted to know how we incorporate our own faith into our stories, or how are
Or the
we?
character, yeah.
Was it like into what we write?
How do you and God get together and write the story?
Okay,
Oh, that's a
okay.
good
Okay,
question, Maria.
okay, that's a good way to put it. I would say like when I get inspiration, because I get inspiration, I mean that's another another question a lot of people, you know, when you're an
Yeah.
author, you get asked, where do you get your ideas from? And you know, and piggyback a little bit on what Jeannie said, it's life, it's real life. I mean, people go through struggles, they go through trials. We're all in this together, but I will take the time if once I get a story and I'm pretty solid on it, and I'm going, okay, I've seen a lot of different little nudges, little you know, God whispers, little things that are saying, okay, this is where I need to focus my attention right now. Um, I will sit down and a lot of times I will go take a walk. And I'll put whether a lot of times when I take my walks, I have music on my earbuds. But well, I don't use earbuds because my ears don't fit them, but I stick my phone in my pocket and I play it out loud. So anybody that happens to walk by me will just get praise and worship music as they're walking by me. But I will go take a walk and I a lot of times will not have the music on. And so I will just sort of let nature, let the air, let, you know, whatever the sounds are, and just take an opportunity to say, okay, God, you and I are at it again. Here we go with the next story. And I just sort of say it's going to be in your hands. And I try to do my best in my routine to kind of like where you go to church service and they say, let's open up with prayer. And, you know, you start your church service. That's kind of how I do the same thing because I never know who's going to read my stories and I never know who needs to hear it. There's a lot of content in my stories um, that ends up being there that I don't necessarily plan. And so I tend to be more of what, well, in the industry, a lot of times it's called a seat of the pants writer, and I absolutely hate that phrase. Um, and so I call it more of an intuitive writer or exploratory writer. And so I will generally have a kind of an idea of the story that I have in mind. I will know pretty much the primary characters. I sort of know their arc in a very general scope, but then the rest of the story and the details of the story, I don't plot out. And I also what comes as a surprise to some people. I don't write my stories in order either. And so, unless I'm under a deadline, like when Jeannie edited a book and I had 3 days to get it turned in, and she and I were up all night and, doing that, then I had to write it in order. But for the most part, I just piece it together, and I kind of, and sometimes if I get stuck, I'm one that I don't really believe in writer's block necessarily, because writer's block, it generally is an indication that something's not working in the story. And so if you're blocked, you need to go back and kind of figure out what isn't working. And sometimes that happens when you skip what isn't working, write another scene, and then figure out what did work, figure out what is working over here, and then figure out what you need to do to tie the two together, and to link the middle of the story. But and a lot of times I try to, sometimes I don't, but I miss the mark sometimes, but I try to let the Holy Spirit guide and say, okay, God, let the words that I am putting down in this story be the words that are going to reach the intended audience. And I try to maintain humility and understand that it is just a gift that God has given me, and it's my responsibility to use it for His glory. And I try to set myself aside and not get me into the story and think, oh yes, look at me. And, and I have my moments. I mean, we're all human, and we get times where we boast and we brag and everything. But I do try to put God right there at the beginning before I sit down to actually put fingers to the keyboard or voice to the voice recording if I'm out walking and doing things.
Awesome. Thank you. Allison?
Yeah, I think so for me, especially with Deep Cries Out, I've since written another full manuscript and I've started a third, and each of those has been a little different from Deep Cries Out. But with Deep Cries Out specifically, it was like a need, like I had to write. I had been in a season of intense depression and anxiety. And I had a really dear friend from Bible study say, you should journal about this time in your life so that when you're out of it and you've walked through it, you can look back and see, like God's faithfulness to you. And part of me was like, I don't ever want to remember the season in my life ever again. Like, why would I write it down? But her words just really stuck with me. And I think, that was kind of the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that, prompted her to say that, encouraged me in that way. Because I had panic attacks like almost daily for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 months. And every time I felt one come on, I would just start to write. And, as the weeks and months kind of went on, I thought, this would be a lot more fun for me and kind of get me out of my own head if I fictionalized this and made it, like kind of into a story and kind of removed myself from it.
We can't hear you. You went mute. No.
Let's see.
There
Is
you
that
go.
better? Yay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's better.
Yeah, so as you've probably garnered from the title of my book, But Deep Cries Out, it's a direct reference to Psalm 42. And so that book of the Bible has specifically been, really dear to me and dear to my faith, as a believer. And so along with the depression and anxiety, there was a big season of insomnia too. And so I would just be up in the middle of the night and it would really just be, me and the Lord. And I think, kind of like it was mentioned earlier, it's not like a direct revelation from the Lord, the things that I'm writing, but there are things, that He impresses on our heart to say. I think Jeannie said that. And then kind of like Tiffany just mentioned, when I finally had everything compiled into 80,000 words, it was like, what do I do with this now? This is actually a book, And so at that point, the research kind of kicked in, for the publishing industry, like where can this go? Because, this could be helpful to somebody else. And so that was kind of a prayer, like as they began pitching. So I would say not only, is our faith rooted in the writing of our stories, and in our books, but it's also there like in the pitching to agents and the marketing as well. Like it's a consistent like surrender of handing what you've written over to the Lord so that, in his hands, it can get into the people that need to hear it. And that's one of the most, I think, rewarding things about feedback from Deep Cries Out is that I've had a lot of people who are like, I've experienced anxiety like this before, like your main character does. And it's so helpful to see, how the main character walks through it. And so I think, commit your works to the Lord and your plans will be established. And that is just kind of laced in, kind of like Jeannie said, through a couple characters specifically in this story. And in the other manuscripts that I have, it's kind of woven in different ways. But I think as long as we're writing with a heart to glorify and honor God, like even if we feel bad while we're writing it, like even if we
Mhm.
can't see it, he can see it. So
Yeah, and that's a hard
And
trick
I
a
think
lot of
Your book,
times.
Allison, I was just looking at it on Amazon. It looks fascinating and there's really good reviews too.
thank
So
you.
I gotta put it on my TBR list, girl.
And like you said, I think, some stories it's a small part of us, some stories it's a larger part, but the author, there's some part of them in every story that
Mhm.
they write.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, and it's
well, I
not
want to,
easy when we go through our struggles. I mean, it's that the advice that you were given to journal is phenomenal, and it's because you
Mhm.
don't know, but people relate to people, they relate to real life, and any bit of real life that we can slice into our characters is going to be a blessing.
Mhm.
and writing's catharsis, really is.
Can be.
So, I want to thank y'all for taking the time to be with me as we close out today. Just one little tip, suggestion, something on your heart that you want to share with those who are going to come back and watch the replay. So I'll just go across my screen as I see y'all. Tiffany?
Don't shy away from doing what you feel God has called you to do. We all have a voice. We all have a story that is gonna inspire. God, I mean, the Great Commission was go out and be disciples or go out and make disciples. And that's, God gives each of us gifts. And if you are called to write, called to be in this crazy industry, um, just just know that God's, you know, he doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. And so if he's called you to it, he'll call you through it and he will walk with you no matter what happens.
Very good. Thank you. Hattie?
Oh, goodness. I would just like to say that we were discussing how you incorporate your faith and how you write with God. I love Alan Arnold. I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Arnold, but his mantra is create with God
Mm.
more than for God. God, what are we going to create together today? So I try to keep that in mind always, that he is the one that has instilled in me the desire to write, and he has a message for me to share with other people, and just go with that. Listen to his voice.
Yes. Thank you. Jeannie?
Don't give up, even when it seems like you want to. Just when things are tough, find other people that are like-minded. Find other authors. Go to the ACFW Facebook page and complain there best as you can. And just let other people also teach you and be teachable. Have a teachable spirit.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. Allison?
Jeannie stole mine. I was gonna say don't give up too.
Go ahead, say it.
But I'll say it again because it's worth saying again. Yeah, I would just say don't give up. Whether that's slogging through a rough draft, whether that's, just planning out something for the plot, whether that's, talking with your editor and, kind of maybe butting heads on something, whether that's marketing the book, whether that's, starting book number 2, 3, 4, 5. Just don't give up on it. Don't give up on it and just always be kind and always just honor God in everything that you do. And just remember that he's, at the center of it all. So it's really not about us. And, apart from him, we can't do anything. So yeah, don't give up.
Thank y'all. It
And
reminds
I'd
me
like
of
to
just,
share, before you
ahead,
take off the
Patty.
recording, I don't know if this is appropriate to share this, but I'm what I call myself a lazy blogger because I solicit other people for guest blogs instead of doing blogging myself. I do have two blogs on my website. One is called Patty's Porch. The other is called the Over 50 Writer. I'm always welcoming guests, and I'm going to be opening up my 2026 schedule soon. So whether you have a book out, whether your thing is editing, Jean, whatever, please check it out and see if you'd be interested. I only blog 4 times a month now. I do the porch on the second and third Tuesday. I do the over 50 on the first and third Friday. But I would love to have you either like Allison with your new book. I think it would be amazing to have you feature that book on there. And Jean, I'm sure you have all kinds of advice about editing and whatever you guys want to write about. But check it out, and I'd love to have you. I'm patty.sheen@gmail.
Thank
You-
you.
well,
And
you can see my
guest
name up here on the
opportunities will
thing.
be in Tuesday's newsletter and Facebook
Great,
page.
okay.
So there'll be that.
Okay.
But just in closing, what y'all were saying, it brought two scriptures to mind. I can do anything through Christ who gives me strength, and then trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not in all your own understanding, in all thy way. Christ will direct thy path and make it straight. So that's where we need to keep our eyes and our heart in this writing journey from beginning to end on every project. So just thank y'all for joining us, and